Hello, I am Virginia Campbell, and this is my exceptional story. It all started in Mineral Wells, Texas, where I grew up, and all the way up until the age of 11, I had two parents. I had two parents in the household. I had a dad that was retired military and a mom that stayed at home and she worked part time. At the age of 11, my father was murdered. And from his murder, I became the product of a single parent. I had, we have four, I have three sisters in my family. One was already married at the time, but I had three still left at home. I am the youngest of the girls. And it was very difficult growing up with a single mom at the age of 11. My mother had to go and work full time. She didn't have any education. She dropped out of school. Just during the time of segregation, it wasn't a time when she could get education. Wasn't really something that was the end all be all. Although she stressed it to us, it wasn't something that they believed in as far as for their own lives, because they felt like to go to work, that was the thing to do, go to work and work hard. So my mother began working, and things were okay. It was very traumatic losing my dad because, like I said, he was murdered. It was very traumatic. But looking back, I look and I think I had the best mom in the world. Um, but I realized when my last sister, my middle sister, went off to college when I was in eighth grade, guess what? I didn't have anyone that could help with my homework. So looking back, I'm thinking, wow, and I had an education career over 28 years, and thinking to myself, I was one of those kids. I am a statistic. I had a single parent. My father wasn't in the household anymore. My mother had no education. And I just thank God that I had teachers that had empathy and could help me along, because after eighth grade, it was very difficult. And then I acted out. I did all the things as a teacher that I tell my students don't do. I was that student that acted out because that was a part of my grieving process. So, having my mom, and she instilled just, you need to go, you need to not have those jobs that I had to have. I want better for you. I want better for your sisters. And, we just moved right along. I went on to college, graduated from high school, went on to college, left out of college, and then had a career in education for several years. And then, bam, my mom, I was married, then all of a sudden I got divorced. So who did I have to depend on? Was my mom. My mom that was on a fixed income, but guess what? I got divorced. I have children. I became a single parent, and my mother was there so much for me through the course of my teaching career, going back to school to get my master's degree. She was there for me 1,000%. Then, so around 8 years ago, my mother, just little things that I would notice when I would go visit her because she was aging. I would notice that she would forget things. She wouldn't necessarily remember what day it was. And we would always, so then my sisters and I band together and we would go see her every weekend. One of us would see her every weekend because remember, she was still living in Mineral Wells. We were all in, the more urban areas, Fort Worth, Abilene, that sort of thing. So then we started noticing her slipping. So I said, well, let me go take her to the doctor. And of course, her doctor that she's had for years did some testing on her to ask her certain questions. And at that point, I realized she couldn't remember. It had gotten really progressively worse. She couldn't remember things that she would have remembered, such as who was the president, what day of the week. So after we talked to the doctor, because we had seen it slipping, but it wasn't to the point that it was, the doctor said, we need to do something. So when we met with the doctor then stated that she couldn't live by herself anymore. And now remember, she was my hero because I didn't have my dad. I didn't have a dad around to show me those crucial times. And I'm sure, and she would tell anyone if she was here, she would tell anyone, you know, I probably was the worst. I kept her on her feet all the time as the baby. But she said, I always try to give a little bit more attention to you because you were so close to your dad. So it wasn't even a question to ask, you know, was she going to go into a facility? It was, listen, I've got to take my mom. So I asked my oldest sister, because this happened in December. So my oldest sister, I asked her if she could keep my mom until June, because I was, at the time, I was a school administrator and my school year wasn't over till the middle of June. So I asked my oldest sister if we could keep my mom for the next, until I finished out this semester. And then she just come stay with me. I don't know how we were going to do it because I had gotten remarried. But I said, you know, talk to my husband. He said, there's, as good as she's been to you, there's nothing, he would be an honor to take care of your mother. So after the semester ended in June, we got my mom, and it just, thinking, you know, just when a person loses their ability to think and to recognize you, it's very difficult. And the whole time that I was going through this process, it was difficult. I was a school administrator, but I thank God that my building principal, I was one of his assistants. I thank God that he was so flexible to me because with my schedule, because when you have a sick and ailing parent and you've had to make these adjustments and you have to provide, we have to find caregivers to come in to care for them while you're at work, and my husband had to, you know, my husband had businesses, and we had to change his schedule, and he had to work at night so I could work in the day. Then we had a nurse to come in while he's trying to sleep, and it's all of that. And sometimes, depending on how my mother did, it took us a long time to find the right nurse for her. So when my husband would call the school and tell me, you know, you need to come home because your mom is real upset, or sundowners has hit, you know, those types of things, I just had to leave. And thank God I had a wonderful principal that understood, because he experienced loss, and he understood and had empathy, and say, just go. And it's that sort of thing. And the days, like I said, in my life, there were no 2 days the same. Every day was different. Some days we had good days with my mom, some days were bad. Some days she could talk to you like she did when I was in my 30s, and she had my kids that were little bitty, who now are adults themselves. She could have a mind as sharp as a tack, but then there are days that she couldn't remember anything. And so having a career and taking care of a parent was extremely difficult. And I've always said, I think everyone in this lifetime has a cross they have to bear. And when you look at people's challenges, and it's that true understanding of yourself. And when you have that, that's how you get true understanding of yourself, is by submitting to the will of God. And it's every single day I had to pray and just say, Lord, you know, and if help me make it through the day, please let my mom have a good day so I can go to work, you know. And seeing her go through what I saw her go through, it's hard. And every day, that prayer that I would ask God every day, how can I go on my job and give 100% when I have my mom who's sick, who has sundowners, And, but God just, he will answer prayers, and he just gives you the strength that you find, well, I didn't know how I could do that. And he gave me the strength and placed me in the midst of a group, a support system that was phenomenal, that allowed me to take care of my mom and to see her through her last days, because there's no bigger honor in this lifetime that I could ever have, no accolades, no education, than to say that I cared for my mom, because she was my best friend. She was my role model. That's who she was to me. She was my beauty queen. She was my everything. I looked at all the sacrifices she made for me as her child, and I think to myself, if I could be maybe a quarter of the mom she was, I would be super mom. Because I gotta tell you, I know everyone thinks their mom is the greatest, but Ruby Raymond was superwoman to me. She could, superwoman to a man, whatever you wanted to say. That's who Ruby Raymond was to me. So when she became sick, there was never a question of whether or not she would go into a facility. No, she's been too good to me as a parent, and I owe her that. And I just remember sometimes, because my mother was very prideful, and at times, when her illness started progressing, with her dementia started progressing, and she just would say, I just don't want to be a burden. And I'm thinking, how can you be a burden on me? I've been a burden on you. I gave you heck throughout high school. I was spoiled. And then, you had to help with my kids. You had to help with the graduate school. I mean, I'm just thinking, if I could do half of the stuff for my kids that you've done for me with limited education, limited finances, then there's no other greater honor that I could ever have of being called Ruby Raymond. I'm, her child to me, because she was the epitome of moms. So as my mom's illness began to progress and got progressively worse, my husband and I made a decision in 2017 that because her illness was getting so bad, that even with the nurse, I just don't think that I would be able to work, and just seeing how progressively worse she became. So we were out on Christmas break, because prior to Christmas break, I'm sorry to back that up, prior to Christmas break, my mother had a heart attack. And she stayed in the hospital for about 4 weeks. And then she was in rehabilitation, because they wouldn't, when she's at her age, they wouldn't allow her to come straight to my house. So my husband and I had some crucial conversations, and we made a decision that, January, he said, when the new semester starts, which I think was like January the 5th or something, I can't remember. And that will be of 2018. He said, we're just not going to go back to work. He said, I'm just going to go ahead and just let you spend time with your mom. He said, she's sick. And now, mind you, my husband, the weight of the world was going to be on his shoulders. It's not, my husband had to work nights. He, it was financially a struggle, but my husband is my biggest cheerleader besides my kids. And he said, we're going to just let you sit at home with your mom. So, but God's the best planner of everything. So, and when January, actually December came, my mom came home December 31st. She came from rehab to come home, and we had made a decision. I just hadn't told my principal that, listen, I'm at peace out. I'm going to be taking care of my mom. And so January 1st, that night I didn't sleep well. My mom was here. She came home. I didn't sleep well at all. And my husband and I were going to take my son, back to college. And at the time, I don't know if it was just apprehension that I felt, or just an ease and feeling that I had felt, but I just didn't sleep well that night. So when I woke up, and which I always do, I went into my mom's room, and I saw her lying on the floor. and she was lying on the floor, and she was telling me to help her up. And immediately I start screaming. My husband, my kids come in to the room, and they see my mom and the state she was in. So my husband said that, my husband called 911, and at the time, my mom was very prideful, so she didn't want people to see her with, in her nightgown, or if she had made a mess, or just anything. And when they came in, I knew it was serious, because when they tried to lift her, she slumped back down. And when they took her out of my house, it was sleeting, because in Texas we get sleet all the time. In the winter time, it's crazy weather. And the ambulance driver told my husband was getting in the car, and I said, let's go. They didn't want me in the ambulance with my mom. He said, we need to go ahead and work on her. He was telling my husband, he said, you might want to go a little bit slower, because we're trying to clean her up and trying to stabilize her a little bit. And I remember on the way to the hospital, my husband stopped at like a convenience store to get some hot chocolate. And I'm like, what are you doing? My mom is sick. But I realize now that time has passed, that, my husband was trying to take some time so I wouldn't see my mom in the state of them working with her. So we get to the hospital, and the prognosis is not very good. So they intubated her within an hour of her being there. And, she, her blood pressure was dipping. She was slowly passing. So my mom was my hero. So for me, it was very difficult to see my mom go. And I just kept praying and asking God to give me the strength, because I have kids. But I was in a low spot. I have a husband, I have kids that love me. And this pain is so great. So my husband had asked us to talk to my sisters. My one sister stayed with my mom that night. The next morning, we had to call my sister, and my husband saw that whenever she would hear me talking, because that's the last to go, she'd wake up, and I would tell my mom, I said, great, Mommy, you're leaving me stuck with Byron, who's my husband. And she would just pat me. And I just told my husband, I don't know that I can make it. I don't know that I can go on. Just, it's difficult. It's still difficult for me. But, so my husband had the bright idea, because he's the calm one. I mean, I'm telling you, he's the calm one. I'm the emotional one. He's the calm, collected one in the group. And he just asked us, my sisters and me, to just step out the room. And he talked to my mom. And my mom just, because probably this poor mom just kept holding on. She just kept holding on. I mean, at one time they had her nine like tubes, and I just remember them cutting them off. And she just kept holding on, just not having any output, urine output, any of this stuff. So my husband asked us to leave, talk to my mom, and then asked us to go back in. And he just told me, he said, Ginger, you need to tell your mom that it's okay. Your baby's gonna be okay. Because the whole time she would always say the baby, and she'd call me that, because she'd always call me her baby. And she would just, and when the intubator, she quit talking, obviously, but she would just touch my hand and just, or she'd wake up. And I just said, Mom, I'm going to be okay. And at the point that I said that, it was maybe 10 minutes and then she was gone. And, you know, she was gone and she left. And it was on January the 1st. Like I told my husband, God's the best planner, because I was going to tell my principal the 5th that I wasn't coming back to work. And fast forward 3 years, I've retired. God allowed me to finish the course, and that's one thing that I just said, God's the best planner, because I wouldn't have been able to retire in June had I had left my my position as an administrator at the school. But he's the best planner, although it hurts. But my mom would always say, and you've heard this millions of times, but God is the author and finisher of everyone's faith. And, he's the author and he's the finisher. I'm just the publicist. I'm just going to produce his work. And I hope that people can see it within me. And just, if I could give any advice to myself, I would tell anyone that's going through this and just having a sick parent, you may be married, maybe not married, just trust the process that God puts you through. Find a support system and just lean on to him and trust the process. And as you trust the process, know who you are, know yourself. And how do you know yourself? By fully submitting to the will of God. And that's, looking back, I just said, wow, God, it's been a ride. It's been a ride. But I look at my mom's life and I listen to Dr. Rick Wallace of Houston. He's a psychologist, and he says that, live your life to the full. He said, because when you leave this earth, you want to make you'll be on you. But he says, live your life to the fullest extent every day. And that's what, if I could tell anyone, is just to live your life to the fullest and just trust the process, because it does get easier. It does, And my mom's energy is here. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. And her energy is right here with me every day. So I just trust the process. I just look back and I think, Mommy, what will we be doing today? I'm retired. What will we be doing today? No more keeping little bitty kids and telling me I'm too old for this, and keeping my little kids. Because remember, my mom had me at 35, so she was no spring chicken. So, but I look back and I think, Mommy, what were we doing today? What will we get our hands in today? So now that I've retired, I'm after 28 years in education and having the experiences that I've had, I am in the process of writing a book about my experiences and some conclusions that I've come across. Whatever I need to do to be support and of assistance, because truly, when I tell you, every day was a different day and a challenge, and just like, oh, how am I going to make it for today? But like when people say, but God, that truly, he sent me the best husband he had for me and the best kids for me. And that was my support, because I couldn't go and I had sisters, but my mom was here with us every day in, day out. And I just think so much that when you're going through this, you need, as you're walking this out, and God's building and perfecting your faith, you need someone to talk to. And, if I'm that person, I am here, because I truly understand.